So, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining this fourth Berlin Real Estate Talk. Today, our guest is Mr. Volker Mauch, solicitor and attorney in Berlin, Germany. Hello, Volker.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining this call. So, Volker is a lawyer and in Berlin, and his field is buying properties within Germany for international clients. And Volker will run us through the first 30 minutes with a very short presentation, giving you the typical answers or replying to the typical questions you might have. Thank you for all these massive questions you sent us earlier in the last 2 weeks. So we will respond to these questions in the second half of this talk. So the first 30 minutes, please feel free to listen to Volker. And you, of course, can use our chat. If you're new to these calls, you can see them on the bottom. There is an option where you can ask questions during this conversation. We will note them, and during the second half, we will, of course, respond to your questions. Volker, may I ask you to introduce yourself first, please?
Yeah, some of the people maybe know me. My name is Volker Mauch, vpmk attorneys. We are a law firm based in Berlin and Stuttgart, so north and south of Germany. And what distinguishes us from other law firms is that we are focusing on international private clients. So one of our main areas of expertise is residence and work permits, but the other one is investments, namely real estate investments. And because we work with international private clients, we know that their needs are quite often different from what German investors, for example, have. So our services are tailored to the specific needs that an international investor has. And to explain that a little bit better, I will go through the procedure of a real estate purchase, and then you can see what services are there included, and you will see that this is quite a full package. In general, if you look for more information, again, targeting international investors, you can find it on our website, vpmk.com. You'll find some general information about real estate in Germany, about rental contracts, about the also about the purchasing procedure. So please feel free to look there, and also please feel free to contact me if you have other questions. So I have a presentation prepared, which has a couple of slides, which might be helpful to understand the process. So if we can see the first slide, that would probably help. Yeah, okay, here we go. Yeah, so actually I'm talking about the second slide already because this one is what I just said. So many of you will ask, okay, what's the, how much does it cost to purchase real estate in Germany? So you have some typical site costs in addition to the purchase price. That is the purchase tax. Yeah, the purchase tax is a local tax which is different depending on where you are buying. That is 6% in Berlin and also in Frankfurt. It's 3.5% in Leipzig and also in Bavaria. Somewhere in that range, maximum 6.5% is the real estate purchase tax for each individual purchase. It is due upon notarization, so usually 4 to 6 weeks after we have signed the purchase contract. It is a tax that is usually paid by the buyer. Yeah. The notary and land register fees is it's a degressive fee, so the higher the purchase price, the lower the percentage. Most of that is also due about a few weeks after the notarization. Then there's another small percentage, 30% of these fees are due when the property is actually transferred in the land register. We always say it's about 1.5% of the total purchase price. But again, if you, for example, invest €1 million, then it's more going to be like 1%. Then legal fees, I'm actually referring here to our fees because we offer a complete service package from the contract negotiation, implementation, signing of the contract, representation at the notary, and implementation of the contract during the contract phase of 1% plus VAT that we have to charge, so it's 1.19%, and then possibly broker's fees, depending on your agreement there. Next slide is going to show us a little bit how does a real estate purchase usually enroll in terms of the timeline. So the first thing that you usually do is you pick and reserve a property. Yeah, that is the top arrow there. We are then preparing the actual purchase agreement, either based on a draft that we have received from the notary or from the, if it's an off-plan building, also often from the developer. We also prepare for the actual signing, because in Germany, if you want to purchase real estate, you have to do that with a notarized contract. And notarized means that both parties go to the notary and he reads out the contract loud, and both parties are present, and at the end they sign one document which stays with the notary, and then they're just copies of that. You don't want to come to Germany for that, because it's not so interesting to listen to a German contract. You would need a translator. It's a lot of hassle. So in 99% of the cases, we represent our clients at the signing of the notary contract, or at the notarization of the contract. And for that, we need a power of attorney, not just a simple power of attorney that you can simply sign, but a power of attorney that needs to be signed either at a notary with apostille or at a German embassy in your country. But this is something we will guide you through this procedure, make it clear what is the content of the power of attorney. It's bilingual anyway, and also help you making that appointment at the embassy or consulate. If you want to finance the apartment, then also in that time, you usually deal with your finance broker and prepare the loan. If there are any documents necessary regarding the property, we will take care of that. Personal documents, of course, you have to hand in yourself. And then ideally, if all these three things are in place, so the legal due diligence, so the preparation of the contract, the power of attorney, and the financing, then we will make a notary appointment. I didn't really speak about the due diligence before. That is, of course, a part of our service. So you will get an explanation of the contract as well in general, because you're not familiar with the process, explaining how this works and how this contract is actually set up, but also pointing out specific parts of it and also asking you a couple of questions just to make sure that we are really making the contract the way that you want it. So once these three things are in place, notary appointment, and then we go to the notary appointment, and there the notary reads it out loud, as I said before, and then we sign the contract. And with that point, you have a binding contract for an apartment. So then comes the implementation, and then of course it's quite different whether you buy off-plan or whether you buy an existing apartment. So for off-plan apartments, and that's what this slide is mostly focusing on, you have a construction period. Yeah, usually the construction period is about 1 to 2 years, but of course it depends on the time you purchase, how much of that is left. So during this construction period, we will follow up all communication. We will be present for any questions. There will be invoices coming pro rata payments. So along the building progress, there will be coming invoices for certain milestones. And we will always check them and make sure that they are correct and that you are secured to pay, that there's no risk of you losing the money due to insolvency of the developer or any problems that might arise here. So we will always be with you until the full completion. At that point, we will then organize, well, actually that's the next point already, the completion of the apartment. And at that point, we would organize the acceptance and handover. For an apartment that is already built, the procedure is of course a little bit different. We don't have this long time between the contract signing and the handover, but still there are a couple of steps in between which have to be fulfilled to make sure that you are secure by the time that you pay the purchase price. And so the process of acceptance and handing over the apartment is something that we also accompany, although for the technical part, we will get in some technical expert to make sure that the building is really in accordance with the building laws and the technical standards. So At the end, you will have the takeover, and then at that point, you can either use the apartment yourself, of course, or you choose to give it to Black Label, for example, for administering it. We will, in any case, make sure that the transition is smooth there, and that you don't have to worry about what is to do next. We'll always follow with the next step. So the process is, I think, quite straightforward. Again, it's a time period that depends whether it's an off-plan building or a ready-made building or an existing building. An existing building, I would say the whole timeline will take about 4 to 5 months. Yeah, will take about 2 months until you have the keys, or 2.5 months until you have the keys. But then the ownership transfer quite often takes another 4 to 6 weeks until that is done. So the total will be between 4.5 and 6 months. For an off-plan building, it can be considerably longer because you have the whole building process. So for many of you, it may be interesting what comes after that, and that's why the last arrow is there. So most buyers in Germany hold the apartment for 10 years, because 10 years after signing the contract, they can sell the apartment free of taxes. That is a tax incentive for private individual investors. I'll get a bit more into detail about that, but what's important is that it starts at the signing of the contract, these 10 years. So they don't start at the handover, but if you have a off-plan building, it starts already at the signing of the contract. So you don't have to hold it for a full 10 years after the handover. So maybe we can go to the next slide where I explain a little bit the procedure, what needs to be done. So again, this four steps, I say: preparation of the power of attorney, gathering of documents, and providing mortgage documents. That's kind of the really basic preliminary work. From what we will need from you then is the personal mortgage documents, and you will need to go to the consulate or notary for signing the power of attorney. The next step is the legal due diligence, contract negotiation, explaining the contract to you and getting your approval. And finally, the notary appointment. What we need in this context for you is basically just to read our emails and confirm that we can go ahead, or discuss and ask questions so that we can sort those out. The step 3, the signing of the contract with the implementation, controlling invoices and securities, and handle your mortgage. Forgot that before. The mortgage, if you have a mortgage, we will of course also be in communication with the bank to make sure that they pay out the mortgage when it is due. You don't really have to do anything there apart from replying to our emails as usual. What you need to do in the implementation, however, is of course you need to pay your own capital when it's due. Again, we will tell you that, and to reply to our emails. And the last step, the actual handover and acceptance, that's the first part. We will organize that for you. You don't have to do anything again, other than speaking to us when we ask you or otherwise. And we will also control the ownership transfer in the land register. That's happening afterwards. And we will make sure that the management will get all the documents needed. So I guess that's in a nutshell, what's needed to purchase real estate in Germany with the support of vpmk. I think it's quite straightforward, and you can see that there's actually not too much needed from you, and definitely it's not necessary to come to Germany for that. Another question that I get very often in this context is about the taxes for real estate. And for that, I have prepared another slide for the taxes. So basically, there are 5 taxes that matter for real estate owners. The first one is the property acquisition tax, which I mentioned before. Pretty simple, 6% in Berlin, or the 3.5% in Leipzig. One-time tax. Once it's paid, you don't have to deal with it anymore. The next time it's going to be the purchaser, when you sell the property, who's going to be responsible for paying that. Then we have the property tax, which is an ongoing tax comparable to the city council tax if you have purchased in the UK. It's fairly low in Germany. It's right now it's in rediscussion, but the total amounts are supposed to stay the same. So we currently, we always say a one-bedroom apartment is about 300 to 400 euros per year. Yeah. It's a tax that can be transferred to the tenant if you have a net cold rental, which is the norm. So for most owners, it's not even a cost factor because they can transfer it entirely to their tenant. Then we have the taxes on the rental income. There's going to be an extra slide for that. And the taxes on the sales profit. There's also an extra slide for that. And then the inheritance and gift tax. That is very individual on who's going to inherit from whom and what's the amount. Germany does have an inheritance tax and also a gift tax that is usually applicable to real estate in Germany, but they're quite large free amounts that will again be put into relation to the world inheritance. It's a bit more complicated, so I think if you have more questions there, I think it's really something that we should discuss in an individual conversation. So I would like to go to the next slide, which is the taxes on the rental income. So the rental income is considered normal income in Germany. So it's subject to the normal income tax rates, which are progressive tax rates. And that first sounds quite high, 14% to 45%, and most of our clients first say, whoa, that's a lot of taxes. But what actually changes the picture quite substantially is if you look how much of your income is actually going to be taxed, because a lot of the income is deductible before you even apply any taxes. And to name the two most important ones, it's the depreciation, 2% on the building value, and the mortgage interest. And to make that a bit more graspable, there is an example calculation, which I have from an earlier sale that we accompanied. There was a purchase price of 538,539 roughly, with a 54% loan to value, so a 291,000 euro loan. That is quite conservative. You probably could get a higher loan to value. It depends a little bit on your personal situation and the property. That was a 63 square meter apartment, which then could be rented out for 26 euros per square meter. So it was pretty high end, the apartment. And these 63 square meters times 26 made a rental income per year of 19,687 euros. So this is, again, net cold, so side costs come on top of that. Roughly 20,000 euros rental income. What we deduct from that is the interest of 2.5% on the 291,000 euro loan, which is 7,275 euros. So that was fully deducted, is fully deductible. Then I deducted some expenses. Usually owners have some expenses that they cannot transfer to the tenant, be it that they have some administration fees, or they have some tax advisor fees, or some travel expenses, something that they cannot, that the tenant will not pay for. And this is just a rough amount. This can also be deducted, of course. And then comes the really interesting part, depreciation. 2% of the building value. The building value is usually about 80 to 90% of the total investment. So here I took 85%, depends a bit on the individual apartment. So 2% of the building value, which makes this, let me calculate, 1.7% of the total investment, or 9,161. And look, now we have the taxable profit that's left after deducting the interest, the expenses, and the depreciation. And the taxable profit is now 2,114 euros. Yeah, rental income per year, 19,687. Taxable actually only 2,114. And because it's so low, you also have a quite low tax rate, 16.8%. So you come to an approximate tax of 340 euros. So that, of course, looks very different than the progressive tax rate of 14%. So it's really important to see the full picture here on what this tax rate is actually applied, because compared to the taxes that are paid in other jurisdictions that I've seen, the German taxation is actually quite good for the real estate investors. And most of our clients who finance, they usually don't pay any taxes on their ongoing income because they just have enough deductibles for that. So the other tax that I would like to talk about is actually the taxes when you sell the apartment. The English term is capital gains tax, or the UK term, is the capital gains tax. We don't have a specific tax for that. Again, income from the profit of selling an apartment or real estate is, again, in general, income. So it's taxable as income tax, progressive tax rate, as I said before, 40–45%. The higher the tax, the higher the percentage. So that, again, doesn't sound too competitive compared to other jurisdictions, but Germany has two quite interesting tax exemptions for private investors. Yeah, private investor means that you're not supposed to sell more than 3 units within 5 years. Yeah, so you cannot sell an unlimited amount of apartments. But if you are within that frame, you have 100% tax exemption for an apartment that you have held for 10 years. And again, as I said before, the 10 years start from the signing of the contract. And these 10 years are a flat, clear line. After that, you do not have to pay any taxes on the profit. Another tax exemption is for owner-occupiers. In that case, you don't even have to keep the apartment that long. You have to own the apartment basically in the year of the sale and the year that is the 2 years before. So if you sell, for example, now in 2020, you have been the owner of the apartment in 2019 and 2018. Doesn't have to be the full year, but you have to have been the owner and self-user of the apartment in these 2 years. And in that case, you can sell the apartment also without paying any taxes on the profit. That is basically what I wanted to say about the procedure and the taxes. So, Achim, if you have any questions, please.
Yes, Volker, I have a couple of questions, of course. Yeah. So first of all, great. Thank you for this fantastic presentation.